So at this point, I'm sure you guys have probably seen, let's say, a video or two on the iPhone 14 Pro. I'm not going to go over everything and introduce it. What I want to do is to answer the biggest question that I had with the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. How does it compare to the 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max? Obviously, a lot of changes on the 14 side. We've got a new processor, the A16 Bionic. We've got the Dynamic Island Boys, which is probably the worst name that I've seen for what appears to be a really awesome piece of technology. Updated camera, supposedly better battery life, always on display, but do those make a difference? And should you get an iPhone 14 Pro or get now a killer deal on last year's iPhone 13? If Apple flexed with anything in their presentation, it was cameras, and this was the most needed change for the iPhone, let's say, since they got a high refresh rate. I mean, Android World has run not only laps, but laps, circles, ovals, I don't know, what other shape, octagons around Apple when it came to the megapixel game for years. I mean, Samsung's got like 108 megapixels in their phones. Now, it's obviously not a sheer number of megapixels that matter, and Apple's done a great job with the 12 that they've had, but certainly from a perspective standpoint, Apple was behind. So, 48 now, which is awesome, but Apple's cameras have always been really good. The iPhone 13 Pro, I think, stepped up its game and produced some of the best photos on the market, but there were definitely setbacks with it. Just before I talk about my opinions on the camera, let's just blind test it here, shall we? One of these is the iPhone 13 Pro. One of these is the iPhone 14 Pro. And just to spice it up a little bit, let's throw in a third mystery phone. Can you tell which is which on here? Leave the comments down below. I'll let you bask in the pictures, look at the things that Apple was touting, look at focus, look at colors, look at low light, all of those things, and just like see if you can tell a difference here. I'm also gonna guess that you couldn't tell a difference. I'd imagine a lot of you thought that the Pixel 6 Pro was actually the iPhone 14 Pro, because I did when I saw these images first. All that was just to say, the 14 Pro takes great pictures, but so did the 13 Pro. So I think one of the benefits of that 48 megapixel is now you actually can have a real sort of 2x optical zoom instead of sort of doing the digital inflation on it. The 3 times telephoto is still there. They added some nice features on the video side, added action mode. It kind of gives you a gimbal-esque sort of stability there. 2.8K on 60 frames per second. Cinematic mode got some improvements. 4K now up to 30, which I know makes a lot of my friends, let's say, very happy. And those are all nice improvements. But if you are just like taking these photos and uploading them to Twitter, Instagram, videos on TikTok, wherever you're uploading these things, I'm gonna say you will notice zero difference between the 13 Pro and the 14 Pro. If you want raw images, you now have much more data to sort of go in and edit. I think that was a problem with the 13 Pro's RAW. You didn't get that much more information versus just like a JPEG that you had. That is a nice improvement. I don't know if that's a fringe use case. If that is your use case, then 100% 14 Pro or Pro Max, you're gonna absolutely love it. Hey, you Rob Rosenfeld from the Apple Circle?
That's not me, buddy.
Hey! That's Rob Rosenfeld! Honestly, when it comes to camera, I'm happy there's more megapixels, and it's nice to have. I don't think that camera is a big enough reason alone to upgrade from a 13 Pro to a 14 Pro. Now, if you're on a 12 or 11, different story, but just comparing those two, I think the 13 is still incredibly good. Now, the 14 is definitely better, but really not worth the $1,100 or $1,000, depending on which phone right now. So the most distinguishable feature of the iPhone 14 Pro this year is the screen. And I think this is unsurprising for an iPhone, but this year we got a few key changes that I'm personally excited about. That saying this name like makes my skin crawl. It's Dynamic Island. That was the best thing they came up with Having said that, I think the feature is awesome to have. All the leaks, remember, were this weird kind of pill shape with an eye. I think they did a killer job bringing something very new to iOS, something that needed something really new. Now, it's not like a revolutionary thing, it's mostly notifications, but it's also another way to multitask. I thought it was really cool if you're listening to music, for example, and you swipe away, you get the music player up there. But then if you go and set a timer, it splits. You get access to 2 apps right there. I think how you access the app versus sort of the pull down widget is a little bit backwards on that, but I imagine I'll get used to it with muscle memory. I think Dynamic Island is an incredible feature. I think it's only going to get better when third parties really get more access to it. I love having it, and I think that there was any reason to get a 14 Pro over the 13 just for a newness factor. I think that's it. And I'm somebody who is always chasing the newness dragon when it comes to tech. It's a problem that I have in my life. That alone was a reason for me to want to update. Maybe it is for you, maybe not. But perhaps the always on display might push you over the edge. Now, the comments, I'm sure you can see it. Android has had this for literally, I think like a decade or so. It's nice to see Apple sort of do it. It's weird looking at these phones, it kind of just dim. And I kept thinking that the phone is still on. When you're looking at it, it's just a dimmer version. You can't customize the always on display either. It's just, you can customize your lock screen and then that'll show on the always on display. It wasn't the implementation that I expected. I think a lot of us expected kind of Samsung's take where the screen goes totally black and they'll start showing what's happening as it pops up. It works, it's new, it's totally binary. It's either on or off. Again, no tweaking you can do in there. I'm gonna keep it on. I like it, but I don't know, your use case may vary. I haven't had this nearly long enough to give any say on how it's going to impact battery life. Apple says it should have longer battery life, but have not tested it yet and cannot say. But if there's one area of the phone where I'd say I think we'll see improvements in iOS 16.1 or .2, whatever they get, I can see ultimately having there be customization inside the always on display. Now, if you are a screen nerd, and I'm self-professed, I have a problem with screens. Screens make the phone for me. This might be something that you want to consider. The 14 Pro is 2 times brighter in the sun at 2,000 nits. All right, so I'm in direct sunlight. I wanted to compare the brightness of the 14 Pro. It's supposed to get 2,000 nits for a short period in direct sunlight. I've got these brightnesses up 100%. They don't look any different. They don't look any different to me. I don't know if it's gonna translate on camera too, but they both look equally bright. Those are the big ones. Everything else new at the iPhone 14 Pro are like edge cases. If you flip this phone over, it's hard to tell that this isn't just an iPhone 13 Pro at all. But some other things that are here that are kind of neat as well. We've got the satellite SOS. It's not out yet. Hopefully a feature you never have to use in an emergency, but it is certainly nice to have. Crash detection. Again, I hope to never use it, but if I needed it, I'd probably be very grateful that it was there and probably very happy that I spent the extra money for the 14 Pro. This one chaps me a bit. eSIM. Now this is unique to the US only, but no physical SIM tray, which is clearly the next step towards a portless iPhone. And as somebody who switches phones a lot, I am very not excited about this. You know what I mean? I think ultimately this will be a very easy thing to switch from phone to phone, but it is not there yet. If switching from iPhone to iPhone, Apple's made it very easy. But if you're switching from iPhone to a Z Fold 4, that is a complicated process that involved me having to call the carrier. And then if I want to switch back, it's the same thing. It reminds me back to the early Verizon days when it was CDMA and you had to call to activate new phones. It was a pain. And it seems that it's going to be a pain again. And it's also a pain I imagine a lot of you have experienced on launch day when you have to do anything carrier side to get phones work. Maybe you're lucky and it went smoothly. Maybe you're on the phone with T-Mobile for 4 hours. I don't know. It's awesome that it's there. You can still kind of dual SIM it, but now it's dual eSIM if that matters to you. Aside from those, the internals have changed a bit. Obviously the A16 is here and it's new, but Apple's processors are always so good. You never see really anything that they can do until almost the end of their life when you use after taking advantage of the extra processing. From a sheer horsepower standpoint, there is no compelling reason to upgrade. Speaking of no compelling reason, the design is pretty much the same between the 14 and the 13 Pro. I mean, there's new colors, there's new purple, the new space black looks awesome. I love the idea of looking like a new phone. This most definitely does not look like a new phone. In fact, if you try really hard and make a few little cuts, you can fit a 14 Pro and a 13 Pro case relatively easily. So design-wise is not a reason to upgrade here. Personally, and again, as someone who admits that I have a problem, dynamic island, always on display are reasons enough for me to be excited for the iPhone 14 Pro. And I gotta try to think, if I didn't do this for a living, would I upgrade? And the answer is probably yes, because I don't know, I'm a chump like that. But if you have a 13 Pro and you're happy with it, and you don't need dynamic island for some particular reason, you're not drawn to new things and shiny things all the time, it's really if you're a better person than I am, it is most definitely not worth the upgrade. Now, just a small part of this video too, if you're on a 12, 11, or anything older than the 13, I think 100% worth it. The camera upgrades are gonna be huge. You'll love having a high refresh rate on the display. Obviously the always on and dynamic island should be huge upgrades. I think this is more of an S type year for the regular 14 and the 14 Pros. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a refinement, I guess, of what Apple already knew worked. But they're gonna take you money for that refinement. It's a question only you can answer.